March 15th, 1943. 0347 hours. North Atlantic, grid square BE 4329. The periscope lens fogged for exactly 3 seconds as Oberleutnant zur See Hans Dietrich wiped condensation from the eyepiece with his sleeve. 3 seconds of blindness in the pre-dawn darkness that would determine the fate of 2 Allied merchant vessels and 47 souls. In those 3 seconds, the mathematics of submarine warfare shifted from precision to chance, from calculated attack to desperate improvisation. What followed would be recorded in the war diary of U-247 as a textbook torpedo attack. What the official records would never capture was how a simple mechanical failure transformed routine patrol duty into a haunting lesson about the razor-thin margin between victory and catastrophe in the Battle of the Atlantic. The transformation of Hans Dietrich from eager naval cadet to hardened U-boat watch officer had begun 18 months earlier at the Kriegsmarine submarine school in Kiel. Like thousands of young German men in 1941, he had volunteered for the submarine service, believing Nazi propaganda about the romantic nature of undersea warfare. The recruitment posters showed heroic crews in pristine uniforms returning triumphantly to port with victory pennants flying. The reality of life aboard U-247 bore no resemblance to those images. By March 1943, Dietrich had learned that submarine warfare was not about heroism, but about mathematics, mechanical precision, and the constant struggle against an ocean that wanted to kill you as much as the enemy did. U-247 had departed Lorient on February 28, 1943, as part of the Kriegsmarine's desperate attempt to stem the tide of Allied shipping that was slowly strangling the Third Reich. The boat carried 14 torpedoes, provisions for 60 days at sea, and a crew of 48 men, ranging in age from 19 to 37. Commander Wolf Gang Kelner, a veteran of the 1940 Norwegian campaign, had briefed his officers on their mission parameters during the final hours in port. Intelligence reports indicated heavy convoy traffic along the northern shipping routes. Their patrol area covered approximately 40,000 square miles of the North Atlantic, a killing ground where German submarines had sent over 3,500 Allied vessels to the bottom since 1939. The journey to their assigned patrol sector had taken 12 days, navigating through the Bay of Biscay under cover of darkness to avoid Allied air patrols. During daylight hours, U-247 remained submerged at depths of 60 to 80 meters, the crew moving through their cramped quarters like ghosts, speaking in whispers, every sound potentially betraying their position to listening hydrophones above. The boat's diesel engines, capable of propelling them at 18 knots on the surface, were silenced during these underwater transits. Electric motors powered by massive lead-acid batteries provided propulsion at the cost of severely limited range and endurance. Life aboard a U-boat in 1943 had deteriorated dramatically from the early war years when German submarines dominated the Atlantic shipping lanes. The introduction of Allied radar, improved sonar systems, and long-range aircraft had transformed submarine operations from aggressive hunting expeditions into exercises in survival. Crews now spent 18 to 20 hours daily submerged, surfacing only briefly to recharge batteries and replenish air supplies. The psychological strain of extended underwater operations was compounded by mechanical failures, equipment shortages, and the knowledge that Allied anti-submarine capabilities improved with each passing month. Dietrich had joined U-247's crew in September 1942, replacing a watch officer killed during a depth charge attack off the coast of Nova Scotia. His initial training at submarine school had emphasized technical proficiency and tactical doctrine, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of combat operations. The first time he had looked through a periscope at an Allied merchant vessel, he had seen not an enemy target, but a ship filled with sailors whose only crime was serving their country. This moral complexity haunted every decision, every torpedo fired, every ship sent to the bottom with its crew. The periscope itself was a marvel of German optical engineering, a complex instrument that allowed submarine commanders to observe surface targets while remaining hidden beneath the waves. The Type 7C U-boat's attack periscope featured high-quality Zeiss lenses, variable magnification from 1.5 to 6 power, and sophisticated range-finding capabilities. In skilled hands, this instrument could determine target course, speed, and range with deadly accuracy. But like all mechanical devices operating in the harsh environment of the North Atlantic, periscopes were subject to fogging, mechanical failure, and the constant battle against saltwater corrosion. March 15th had begun like dozens of other patrol days aboard U-247. The crew maintained running silent procedures while submerged, with Dietrich and the other watch officers taking turns at the periscope every 30 minutes. The boat's hydrophone operator, Oberbootsman Fritz Weber, monitored underwater sound contacts, while the radio operator listened for Allied transmissions that might reveal convoy positions. Commander Kelner reviewed intelligence reports and weather forecasts, calculating optimal attack positions based on predicted shipping routes and patrol schedules. At 0330 hours, Weber reported distant propeller sounds bearing 045 degrees, range approximately 8,000 meters. The rhythmic thrum of multiple ship engines indicated a small convoy or independent vessels traveling in formation. Kelner ordered the boat to periscope depth, reducing speed to minimize wake disturbance that might be visible to enemy lookouts. The crew moved to action stations with practiced efficiency, each man knowing his role in the complex choreography of submarine attack. Dietrich took his position at the attack periscope as the boat leveled off at 18 meters depth. The periscope housing extended through the conning tower to the surface, its head barely breaking the waves in the pre-dawn darkness. Through the eyepiece, he could see the faint silhouettes of 3 merchant vessels proceeding westbound at approximately 12 knots. The lead ship appeared to be a Liberty ship, one of the mass-produced American cargo vessels that had become the backbone of Allied logistics. 2 smaller vessels, possibly corvettes or destroyers, provided escort. The tactical situation appeared straightforward. U-247 held an advantageous position ahead of the convoy's projected course. A submerged approach would bring them within torpedo range in approximately 20 minutes. The attack periscope's range-finding reticle indicated the target ships were maintaining steady course and speed, suggesting they had not detected the submarine's presence. Commander Kelner approved the attack approach, ordering the torpedo tubes flooded and armed. As the boat maneuvered into attack position, Dietrich maintained continuous observation through the periscope, calling out target bearings and range estimates to the torpedo data computer operator. The primitive mechanical computer, operated by Oberbootsman Heinrich Müller, calculated firing solutions based on target course, speed, and range inputs. This device, while crude by later standards, represented the cutting edge of naval fire control technology in 1943, capable of predicting intercept points for torpedo attacks with reasonable accuracy. At 0345 hours, with the target convoy at optimal range and bearing, Commander Kelner ordered final preparations for torpedo attack. The forward torpedo tubes were flooded, outer doors opened, and weapons armed for firing. Dietrich maintained his vigil at the periscope, watching for any sign that the enemy had detected their presence. The merchant vessels continued their steady progress, unaware that death approached from beneath the waves. Then, at precisely 0347 hours, condensation from the boat's humid atmosphere fogged the periscope lens. For 3 critical seconds, Dietrich lost visual contact with the target convoy. In those 3 seconds, everything changed. The fogging occurred at the worst possible moment. As Dietrich frantically wiped the lens with his sleeve, the convoy's lead escort vessel executed an unexpected course change, turning 15 degrees to starboard. When visual contact resumed, the tactical picture had transformed completely. The destroyer that moments before had been trailing the formation now occupied a position directly between U-247 and the primary target. The carefully calculated firing solution became worthless in an instant. Muller's mechanical computer continued clicking through its calculations based on outdated position data. The torpedo data it generated would send weapons harmlessly into empty ocean, while the real targets steamed beyond effective range. Dietrich called out the new bearings with urgency that barely concealed panic. Target bearing 062 degrees, range 4,000 meters, course 270 degrees. The destroyer now masks the primary target. Commander Kelner faced the submarine commander's nightmare scenario. His boat occupied perfect attack position for targets that no longer existed where his instruments predicted. The convoy continued westward, while precious seconds ticked away. Every moment of delay reduced the probability of successful attack as targets moved beyond optimal torpedo range. The decision to abort or continue would determine whether U-247 returned to Lorient with empty torpedo tubes or victory pennants. The mathematics of submarine warfare allowed no room for hesitation. Torpedo range decreased with every passing second. The convoy's zigzag pattern, standard defensive procedure for merchant vessels in submarine-infested waters, meant target courses would change again within minutes. If Kelner waited for ideal conditions, the opportunity would vanish entirely. He made the decision that separated successful U-boat commanders from those who returned empty-handed. Fire on current solution. All tubes. Dietrich maintained periscope observation as Muller frantically recalculated firing data. The mechanical computer, designed for methodical calculation rather than rapid adjustment, struggled to process the new tactical geometry. Its brass gears and steel cams clicked through algorithms developed in peacetime, adapted for the chaos of combat through trial and error. The device represented German engineering excellence, constrained by the limitations of 1940s technology, precise but inflexible when circumstances demanded immediate adaptation. Los Eins. The first torpedo left Tube 1 with a compressed air bubble that marked its departure on the surface. Through the periscope, Dietrich watched the weapon's wake streak toward the convoy at 45 knots. The torpedo's wakeless electric motor, a recent innovation in German submarine technology, eliminated the telltale bubble trail that often alerted targets to incoming attack. This technological advantage provided crucial seconds of surprise that could determine success or failure. Lost Sway, Lost Dre, Lost Vier. 4 torpedoes departed U-247 in rapid succession, each weapon programmed for different depth and course settings based on Müller's hasty calculations. The spread pattern, designed to compensate for targeting errors, created a lethal net approximately 200 meters wide. At least one weapon should find its target, even if the firing solution contained significant errors. The torpedo's magnetic influence pistols, designed to detonate beneath target hulls rather than requiring direct impact, represented another German technological innovation. These proximity fuses promised to break merchant vessel keels with explosive force transmitted through water pressure. In practice, the magnetic pistols proved notoriously unreliable, often detonating prematurely or failing to explode at all. German submarine commanders learned to distrust their most sophisticated weapons. Dietrich watched the torpedo wakes disappear into darkness as the weapons approached their targets. The convoy maintained course and speed, suggesting lookouts had not spotted the incoming attack. Through the periscope, he could see individual details of the merchant vessels. The lead ship's cargo booms, the careful blackout procedures that dimmed navigation lights, the tiny figures of sailors moving across distant decks. In 90 seconds, these details would either vanish in explosive destruction or continue unmolested toward their destination. Commander Kelner ordered the boat to deep submersion immediately after torpedo firing. Standard procedure required submarines to dive below 100 meters depth to avoid counterattack from escort vessels. The time between torpedo launch and impact represented the most vulnerable moment in submarine operations. U-boat crews waited in darkness while their weapons traveled toward distant targets, unable to maneuver aggressively or defend themselves if discovered. Weber's hydrophones tracked the torpedoes' progress through passive sonar. The weapon's electric motors produced distinctive acoustic signatures that experienced operators could follow across several thousand meters of ocean. First torpedo running normally, bearing steady. Second torpedo running normally, slight bearing drift to starboard. Third torpedo contact lost, possible premature detonation. Fourth torpedo running normally, bearing steady. The first explosion came at 03:49 hours, 2 minutes and 15 seconds after torpedo launch. The detonation's shock wave transmitted through U-247's hull with sufficient force to rattle equipment and extinguish several light bulbs. Through the boat's steel structure, the crew felt rather than heard their weapons' impact. A collective intake of breath marked the moment every submariner lived for, confirmation that their attack had succeeded. Dietrich raised the periscope briefly to assess damage. The convoy's formation had dissolved into chaos. The lead merchant vessel, struck amidships by the first torpedo, listed heavily to port with visible steam escaping from damaged boilers. Secondary explosions suggested the weapon had detonated near ammunition or fuel storage areas. The ship's cargo of war materials, destined for Allied forces in Europe, now contributed to its own destruction. The second explosion followed 30 seconds later. Another merchant vessel, caught by the fourth torpedo, erupted in flames that illuminated the entire convoy. The weapon's magnetic pistol had functioned correctly, breaking the ship's keel beneath the waterline. The vessel settled rapidly by the stern as flooding overwhelmed damage control efforts. Through the periscope, Dietrich could see lifeboats being lowered and crew members abandoning ship. But the destroyer escort had not remained passive during the attack. The warship's sonar operator had detected U-247's position through acoustic triangulation of the torpedo launches. The escort vessel turned toward the submarine's last known position at maximum speed, depth charges armed and ready for deployment. The hunter had become the hunted in the deadly game of submarine warfare. Kelner ordered emergency dive to maximum depth as the destroyer approached. U-247 descended through crushing water pressure toward the ocean floor, every man aboard knowing their survival depended on remaining undetected. The boat's electric motors ran silently while the crew maintained absolute quiet. Any sound, from dropped tools to whispered conversations, might betray their position to enemy hydrophones. The first pattern of depth charges detonated at 03:52 hours, approximately 200 meters from U-247's position. The explosions lifted the submarine's stern and threw crew members against bulkheads. Light bulbs shattered throughout the boat, while cork insulation rained from overhead. The depth charge's concussive force transmitted through seawater with devastating efficiency, capable of crushing submarine hulls at distances exceeding 50 meters. Weber monitored the destroyer's movements through passive sonar while the boat descended past its tested depth limits. The escort vessel's propellers created distinctive acoustic signatures that revealed course changes and speed adjustments. The warship was conducting a systematic search pattern, dropping depth charge patterns every few minutes in areas where sonar contacts suggested submarine presence. At 03:55 hours, with U-247 at 160 meters depth, a second pattern of depth charges detonated directly overhead. The explosions hammered the boat's pressure hull with tremendous force, while the crew endured the terrifying sound of stressed metal groaning under impossible loads. Several hull plates developed hairline cracks that allowed seawater to seep into the boat. The chief engineer reported minor flooding in the forward torpedo compartment. The psychological strain of depth charge attack affected every crew member differently. Some men prayed silently, while others focused obsessively on mechanical tasks that provided distraction from mortal danger. Himself calculating, Dietrich found survival probabilities based on depth charge patterns and explosion intervals. The mathematics provided intellectual refuge from the reality that death approached with each detonation. Commander Kelner's voice cut through the silence with measured calm that masked underlying tension. All stop. Silent running procedures. The boat's electric motors ceased their gentle humming as U-247 drifted through black water like a steel coffin. Above them, the destroyer's screws churned steadily as the warship continued its methodical search pattern. Each revolution of the enemy propellers brought death closer or carried it away, depending on calculations no man aboard could influence. The third depth charge pattern exploded at 0358 hours, close enough to buckle several deck plates and shatter the glass face of the depth gauge. Fragments of cork insulation mixed with condensed moisture created a fine mist that reduced visibility throughout the boat's cramped compartments. The chief engineer reported hydraulic fluid leaking from damaged lines, while electricians worked frantically to restore lighting in the forward sections. Through his headphones, Weber tracked the destroyer's movements with the concentration of a man whose survival depended on interpreting acoustic shadows and engine rhythms. The warship had reduced speed, suggesting its sonar operators were conducting detailed searches of suspected contact areas. This tactical shift from rapid attack to methodical hunting meant the enemy commander believed he had trapped his quarry and intended to destroy it through systematic depth charging. Dietrich found himself calculating oxygen consumption rates as the boat remained submerged beyond normal operational limits. 48 men breathing sealed steel exertion increase in approximately 2 cubic tube consume normal conditions, meters of air per hour under stress and physicaled, while reducing the timed oxygen demon available before carbon dioxide poisoning became critical. The boat's air purification system could extend underwater endurance, but not indefinitely. At 0402 hours, the destroyer's engines faded to barely audible levels. Weber reported the contact bearing steady at 090 degrees, range approximately 1,000 meters. The enemy vessel had stopped directly above them, its sonar sweeping methodically through the water column. Modern sonar technology could detect submarine hulls at considerable distances, but thermal layers and acoustic shadows provided concealment for boats that remained perfectly silent. The waiting became unbearable. 48 men suspended in darkness while an enemy destroyer decided their fate through electronic calculations they could not influence. Some crew members fingered religious medals or photographs of families they might never see again. Others stared at instrument dials that provided mechanical distraction from mortality statistics no training had prepared them to face. The boat's steel hull transmitted every sound from the surface world above, creating an acoustic connection to enemies who sought their destruction. The destroyer departed at 0427 hours, its screws fading into the Atlantic darkness as Commander Kelner finally ordered U-247 to surface. 2 ships lay beneath the waves, victims of 3 seconds of condensation that transformed precision into deadly improvisation. Dietrich would survive the war, but he never forgot how mechanical failure and human adaptation determined victory in the Battle of the Atlantic. Sometimes history turns on the smallest moments,